Hello YouTube, this is Froogle. This is the A2A Cherokee in prepared version 4 at Latin VFR's John Wayne International Airport. Now the AccuSim aircraft are study aircraft. In terms of everything is modeled in terms of the engine, it's a living, breathing aircraft. You need to take care of it, you need to treat it with respect, otherwise things will break and not perform exactly the way they should. But it's also study level in terms of some of the systems in the cockpit. Let me jump in here and show you. So many of you, I'm sure, grabbed this aircraft because it's a pretty cool thing, jumped in and flew it thinking you know exactly how everything works because it works just like all the other GA aircraft you've ever flown. But despite what you get in the 90-odd page manual that comes with this, there's actually a hell of a lot more detail. For example, this instrument down here, the Davtron Model 903. That is a completely accurate simulation of a Davtron Model 903. You can go on the internet and download the actual owner's and operator's manual for the Davtron Model 903 and it works exactly in this simulation as it does in real life. I'm going to show you how this instrument works in this video. The System 20 Autopilot. Again, you can go online and download the 30-page manual from the manufacturer for how the System 20 works, and it works exactly as you would expect in the actual aircraft, which is beyond cool. Similarly, I'm going to cover that, by the way, in this video as well. I'm going to cover the Davtron and the Autopilot, show you the correct way of using those things. But incidentally, over here on the avionics stack, if you look up these numbers, KX155 TSO, the KR87 TSO, the KN64, and the, which one is the transponder? The KT76A. Go download the manuals for those and you'll find they work exactly as you would expect in the real world in the AccuSim aircraft as well. A ton of depth in this that many people just simply don't know about, so I thought why not make a video on it. Let's look at the Autopilot first of all before we take off. I have the yoke hidden, but actually normally with the yoke on display you have a number of buttons here. Let me show you. So there's an Autopilot mode select here, pop on down here, Autopilot altitude select down the bottom. Up the top here, Autopilot disconnect and then push to talk for talking to ATC. If you hide the yoke, as many people do, these buttons all appear here. So let's hide this yoke. There. Autopilot disconnect, altitude select, and Autopilot mode select. We'll get onto what those buttons do once we get up in the air. Let's talk about the Davtron. The Davtron is an amazing tool. If you're navigating on VORs, then the OBS and the VOR needles over here will deflect, fall to one side, left or right, and doesn't really give you a good indication of exactly where you are in relation to the beacon that you're tracking. The Davtron does. It will show you which radial you are on, depending on whether you've selected nav 1 or nav 2 and to or from, so you can really gauge when you should turn and what should be going on. It's a phenomenal tool. Let's look at the avionics stack real quick. I am flying a very simple procedure here out of John Wayne, which is the approach to ILS or localizer 20 right. And if you look at the chart I'm putting up on the screen right now, you can see that from John Wayne we want to track the 320 radial to Seal Beach, at which point we follow the 049 radial to the northeast at 4,000 feet until we intercept the 256 radial from Paradise. At that point, we should be able to turn and intercept the 196 ILS into John Wayne, and you'll notice there are a number of waypoints there like Snake, Bonk, Lemon, and Dyers. At Snake, it says that we want to be at 3,400 feet and intercepting the 060 radial from SLI. At Bonk, we want to be at 2,800 feet, intercepting the 068 radial from SLI, and so on and so on. This is why this is a very cool way of tracking your progress down to the runway, not only using the navigation instruments, the ILS, but also cross-referencing it with other instruments, and that's where the Davtron comes in. So what I've done is I've set into my radios here, let me reset my altitude, set into my radios here, the two primary nav aids I'm going to be using, 115.7, which is Seal Beach, that's the primary one, we're going to be flying to that and then away from that, and then finally the ILS, 111.75, which is the ILS into John Wayne, ILS runway 20 right. On nav 2 we have our secondary instruments, so 112.2 is Paradise. We'll be using the Davtron to track nav2 and see when we intercept that 256 radial from Paradise. That tells us when we want to turn. And then on the approach into John Wayne is tuned to Seal Beach on nav2. The reason for that is we can track the intersections with radial 060, 068, 076, and measure that we are on the right course for the ILS to land and everything is going as it should. All along the way. Now, I could fly this by hand, and I have practiced this by hand, but I figured why not kill two birds with one stone, and I will show you the use of the autopilot to do a lot of this stuff as well. Anyway, first things first, we want to be tracking the 320 degree radial to Seal Beach. So if I focus in down here on my instruments, we'll set this up to track 320, and we'll set our initial heading here as well to 320. We'll be adjusting these in flight. So they're all set up. We've set in the barometric altitude. Everything is good to go. Our navigation lights are on, landing lights are on. We are good to go. So let's go ahead and taxi out to the runway. I've already done all the pre-flight and the run-up. We don't need to worry about that today. And I think I've got my headphones plugged in. I do. So let's go ahead and taxi. Now, just as in the prepared version 4 video, I'm using Aladdin VFR's John Wayne scenery, and a few of you pointed out there were problems with the scenery interacting with the Orbex scenery I'm using. Well, those problems actually got worse for me, and to the point that the sim would crash as soon as I tried to load into this airport, and I found that there were some conflicts between files from Orbex's Southern California and the John Wayne scenery, and had to go and rename some of those files, effectively removing them in order for this to work. So be aware of that. You might want to do some Googling around if you're finding using one of the Latin VFR Californian sceneries with Southern California from Orbex. If you're getting crashes, you might want to start Googling around and find out which files to change. So quite a long taxi out here. Our turning into the taxiway for the runway is right about there, so I might cut it here, and I'll see you when we're getting ready for that turn. Alright, welcome back. I did actually overshoot my turn. We're going to take the next one onto Juliet and then turn right and then left again. That should put us back where we need to be. Now again, as I said, I want to hit two birds with one stone, so I'm going to show you the Davtron and how that works, but also the autopilot. Obviously, with an aircraft like this, you want to be flying manual, because it's a great fun to fly manual. But even so, I know a lot of you have been asking questions, and I see them a lot on Twitch in particular. How do you use these systems? So I figured I would show you those systems and do things kind of the boring way, but give you some insight into how stuff works in this aircraft. Now notice the Davtron is currently showing dash dash dash. That means it can't pick up the VOR that we're tuned to, 115.7 Seal Beach. Once we get up in the air, you'll see this thing light up, and it will say SLI, meaning Seal Beach, so it's identifying the VOR, and it will actually show you the radial that we're on. Now notice this little TFR switch down here. That's to and from. We want the 320 degree radial to Seal Beach, so the switch is to the left. If it was from, that would be we're flying away from Seal Beach on the 320 radial, so we'll leave this on 2. The other switch here is nav 1, nav 2. We want it on nav 1 for now. Once we're coming back on the ILS, we'll switch it to nav 2 and see how we're doing there. In fact, once we're flying out on the 049 radial from Seal Beach, we'll switch it to nav 2 in order to track our progress, and when we intercept the 256 radial from Paradise, meaning we need to turn right at that point and follow the ILS. So here's our turn onto Kilo coming up, runway 20 left. Now I'm flying out of John Wayne because I really do want to start doing a lot more Pilot Edge stuff. I'm not using Pilot Edge today, so there's no other air traffic, no ATC. Pilot Edge does scare me. There's a lot more people highly qualified, far more qualified than I am to use Pilot Edge on YouTube and Twitch. My favorite is Cat Strater. Really does know his stuff and is a joy to watch. I recommend his videos. I want to get to his level in being confident in using a professional air traffic control training service like Pilot Edge. Alright, so here we go. We're going to take the runway. We're going to turn the strobes on. Landing lights are already on. I'm going to switch the tanks to the other tank now. We taxi it on the right tank all the way here. So left tank for takeoff. Not using flaps for this takeoff, no need. It's a fairly long runway and we're not going to use the whole thing. Let the aircraft get away from me with its speed a little bit there. Okay, here we go. Mixture full rich. And rotate. I'm going to trim the aircraft to climb at about 80 knots. Try to hold this straight. There, you can see the Davtron is instantly lit up. Here, 289 SLI. So we're on the 289 radial, and we're looking for the 320 radial. That's the point at which we would turn right and be tracking that radial. Going to be climbing up to about 2,500 feet. And as we get over 1,000 feet, I'll start walking you through how the autopilot works. Now obviously I have the aircraft trimmed for the climb. I am fighting a little bit. I'm using my Thrustmaster Warthog joystick, by the way, which I never normally do for GA aircraft. Normally I'm using the Virtual Fly yoke, but I thought I would start using the joystick a bit more. And it's tricky for me to be tracking all this stuff with the joystick because I'm just not used to it. So I'm going to turn the autopilot on, make sure the master switch is on, which it is. We'll go autopilot mode select, and we're in straighten level. You see the aircraft is straightening up now, and we're still climbing because that's how I trimmed it. So the first mode when you click that mode button is ST. Let me zoom in down here and you can see it. Straight. So it's going to hold the aircraft on the course that we were currently at, and we can just relax and let the aircraft fly on this course, monitoring the Davtron to see when we start intercepting that 320 radial. You can keep an eye on the OBS here. Notice full left deflection. We have no idea from this dial where we are in relation to Seal Beach. This one gives you a much, much more precise view, which is wonderful stuff. Anyway, climbing up to 2,000, we're going to level off at 2,500. I do have control over pitch, even though the autopilot is managing the roll. So I'll take control of that and we'll power off, bring the power back to about 2,200 RPM over here. Currently at full power for the climb, which is normal. For the little Cherokee, 2,200 feet. We can turn the landing lights off at this point. Okay, and bring the power back now. That will help bring the nose down, as you can see. Now at 2,500 there, we will go altitude hold. There. Notice the blue light that came on. Now, that sound and these yellow lights, that one is saying trim down. The lower light says trim down, so I'm applying downward trim. Only in little increments and then letting go to see what happens. We're going to keep on doing that until the light stops flashing and the noise stops beeping. That's how the altitude hold works on the System 20. So I'm a little bit higher than 2,500. It still wants me to trim down. Bring that power back. It's picking up again because we are picking up speed. You see the light stop flashing and the beeping has stopped as well. And the aircraft will try to come on down now to 2,500 feet. We're on the 305 radial. We want to be turning onto the 320. I've already got my heading hold in here, and that will be the next autopilot mode. Clicking this mode button again moves that yellow light here from straighten level into heading. So that's what we'll be doing next. Very, very logical if you think about it. I am greatly enjoying Prepared version 4. It is a superb sim. Let me show you some visuals outside real quick. And the A2A aircraft just look amazing as well. They really are at home in this sim. Such a smooth flight experience. It's wonderful. I'm using chase plane. I was hoping it would snap the views around a little bit more than it did, but that's fine. We'll pop back in the cockpit and see where we're at. 310. We'll start turning at about 317. We are holding 2,500 feet. Life is very good. Notice this needle is still full left deflected. Even though we're only 9 degrees off in terms of the radials, 8 degrees now, this needle is still full left deflection, which is why it can be quite hard if you're not used to using an OBS to track exactly what you should be doing. $313 degrees. You can see the needle is starting to move now, and this indication down here, by the way, is the distance from the VOR we're tracking. 15.1 nautical miles, 15.2 nautical miles. So you can use the combination of this this and this to gauge exactly where you are in relation to the beacon that you're tracking, which is pretty powerful stuff. 317 degrees is coming up. So we will click mode select once that hits 317. Now, and start our turnaround. See that it's gone to the right into HD, heading hold, and the aircraft is now banking to turn. I will need to trim at this point, not unusual. You can already see the vertical speed indicators pointing downwards, meaning we're descending. Needle over here is moving very nicely. 318 degrees now, 319 degrees. Needle is almost squared up. Almost, we're on the 320 now, but we are 16 miles away, so we do have a little bit of latitude for maneuvering as we currently are. 321 now, but now we actually are pretty well established and we can switch to the next autopilot mode, which is low track. So if I click autopilot mode now, we're going to low track mode. Low track mode is what you typically use for tracking a VOR. High track is what you would typically use for tracking ILS. If you look down here again, you can see there's a straight and level, heading, low and high. So we're in low now to track this VOR, and the aircraft now will very, very happily stay on that VOR on a 320, 321-ish, that's fine, all the way into Seal Beach. So what we can do now is we can go back down to the instruments and we can set our next heading, which is going to be 049. So roll this around as accurate as you can get with a steam gauge. 04, 05, and one to the left, 049. So that's our next heading. So once we get to Seal Beach, we'll switch this into heading mode again. So it's going to be click once to high, click again to straight, and click once again to heading. And we'll turn into heading 049. Then we can get the aircraft established on the 049 radial from Seal Beach. Right now, all there is to do is relax and look at the beautiful scenery. Such a beautiful aircraft. Wonderful stuff. Very immersive sim as well. You see small corrections being fed in there as the autopilot, the System 20, tries to track that VOR. A little bit off right now, we're on 322, but the autopilot will make very, very small corrections to get us back on track. 12.2 miles to go, as you can see down here. You can see the needle here, almost centered. We're in good shape. Now let's see if we can get this exactly on the 320. We are getting quite close to Seal Beach, so I'm not sure we can, but we'll try. This is saying 322. Yeah, you can see it's slightly off here. Just roll this to the left a touch. There. See if that helps us. You can already see the Davtron coming down now from 323 to 321, and then hopefully down to 320, 320. And of course, as we get closer and closer to Seal Beach, that needle will become more sensitive, so will the Davtron. It's going to be harder and harder to maintain course, which is fine, because the first stage of switching to that heading hold is we'll go through straight and level. So we'll just click the autopilot mode selector down here twice to go high track and then straight and level. And then as we pass Seal Beach, or as we arrive at Seal Beach, we'll turn on to 049. And there we are on 320. Works like a champ. Beautiful early evening here, Southern California. As I mentioned in passing, the scenery is all about Southern California with Latin VFR's John Wayne. Weather being provided by Active Sky. And this is accurate weather for the time and day that I'm flying. 7.8 miles to go. LAX is over there. Got to stay clear of that. I don't have the GPS fitted to this aircraft, so we can't see where the Class Bravo airspace starts, but by following the procedure that's published, we'll stay well away from it. So that's it for part 1. I'll see you in part 2, where we'll cover the ILS mode of the Davtron as I bring this aircraft into land back at John Wayne International.